Christmas Eve 2022, 30-year-old trucker Dan Whelan drives through a brutal blizzard on Highway 2, hauling a load of holiday goods from south of Red Deer.
Sounds like a movie.
Yeah.
Like getting the holiday goods delivered through a blizzard.
And there's snow and this. Yeah.
Right? The kids depend on me.
Yeah.
Well, just wait. It dives into some of this familiar lore.
Is it Santa?
Oh.
Coming to you live from a cabin deep in the heart of the Canadian wilderness. We're broadcasting live across the brave and bold province of Alberta. Whether you're at home, in your PJs, or on the road, welcome to tonight's episode. So turn down the lights, get yourself a drink, and let's settle in for tonight's broadcast. Here are your hosts.
Welcome back to Midnight Mysteries, the heart of Canadian paranormal radio. My name is Michael.
Hey everyone, my name is Nathan. Tonight, we're back with Erika, the host of Erika's Ghost Stories, a podcast exploring the histories of people, places, and things that are haunted, the unusually unknown, paranormal activities, and mysteries. Erika has become a regular with us. How does she put up with us, you may ask? Well, you have to ask her that. But tonight, we're excited to have her on again. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm excited to be here and for a nice little Christmas episode.
Tonight, we're diving into the mysteries and stories that swirl around Christmas, a time of year that feels like more than just a cultural celebration. Across the centuries and around the world, people have shared tales of wonder, eerie encounters, and unexplainable events tied to this season. It's as if something stirs in the air during these long winter nights, a reminder that Christmas holds a depth beyond the lights and festivities we've come to know. This is evidenced by personal stories of ghostly visitors, enduring myths about spectral carolers, and legends of miracles that defy explanation. So grab some cocoa, dim the lights, and join us as we unwrap the mysterious and marvelous tales of Christmas lore. Our first story for tonight involves the Jasper Park Lodge. While visiting the historic Jasper Park Lodge for Christmas, our submitter, 12-year-old Sophie Marlowe, and her 12-year-old brother, Lucas, find themselves snowed in with their parents. Restless one night, Sophie hears faint music coming from the abandoned ballroom. Against her better judgment, she follows the sound, dragging a reluctant Lucas along. They see a woman in a faded 1920s gown gliding eerily across the dust-covered dance floor. Her face is hidden by a veil, but her mournful hum fills the room. When Lucas whispers too loudly, the music stops, and the woman turns, revealing hollow, frostbitten eye sockets. The siblings flee, but the ballroom door slams shut behind them, locking her ghostly song in their dreams.
So my question is, when was this story said by Sophie and her brother Lucas?
This was in 2019.
Okay. So they're a little bit older now, obviously.
Yeah.
1920s gown.
That's funny because I was thinking 1920s gown, but in my mind I was thinking this story was from 1920. But yeah, they're a little older now.
Yeah. Well, and again, what we had touched on.
They might be the ghost of this movie.
Yeah.
They've
They're
taken
also
over.
in the ballroom.
They stayed there forever.
Yeah. We had touched on this last episode too, but it seems a lot of these caricatures or repeated bits of lore have some grounding in truth, and I'm just wondering where it started. I don't know, some residual memory of their life.
Yeah, I mean, or maybe it's just the perception of ghosts is always like white in like how the kids in the the white bedding. But I think there's like just been a long history.
Oh, like the white sheet.
Yeah, even if it hasn't been like intentionally to make it true, maybe that's just how people perceive it. They see some, translucent or whitish ghost,
Cloak.
and so
Or
they
like-
just assume that it's some kind of
Yeah.
gown or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, like if you think, it could have so many different aspects to it. It could be gown, it could be like a pajama, it could be, a witch's dress or like an angel gown. Like it just could be so many different
Yeah,
things.
true.
But it's like the white kind of
Or maybe there's
flowy.
Yeah.
there's some sort of glow to it too, and it appears to be dress like in terms of its. I mean, this word's overused a lot now, but it's aura, right? It's
And when something that popped out for me was the dreams, it's like the song in the dreams, but also in your dreams you could maybe see a clearer detail of a gown or a dress versus in real life when it might just be like a shadowy perception of some sort.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Interesting. So since I brought that up, I'll share one of my stories that I found because it highlights exactly what we just talked about. There's also a lady. Here
Oh wow, great
Yeah.
story. Thanks for sharing, Mike.
Another lady.
So my
That's
next
all.
story involves
A lady and a gown.
Yeah, right. So this story is titled "The Grey Lady of Dunvegan." So Dunvegan, I think that's how it's pronounced. It's an area north, probably about an hour north of Grand Prairie, Alberta. So it's pretty far up there. Nothing really big around it. It's where a bridge, one of the highways crosses. I think it's Smoky Lake or Smoky River or Athabasca. I can't remember, but. In November 1960, shortly after the bridge's completion, two men were driving through the snowy, darkened valley. As they cautiously made their way across the bridge, they were shocked to see a woman leaning into the swirling snow, her head hidden beneath a hooded cloak. Despite the warmth of her cloak, her bare feet were exposed to the cold. The men slowed down, hoping to offer assistance, but she didn't acknowledge them. Concerned about stopping on the bridge, they continued to the other side and found a place to pull over. One man ventured back through the snow to check on her, calling out as he approached. However, the bridge was empty. Though he had followed their tracks through the snow, there were no footprints aside from his own. Despite the absence of evidence, both men had clearly seen her, eager to encounter her again. They returned on several nights with friends in tow, focusing their efforts on the bridge. When they finally saw the figure again, she was further up a hill, seemingly picking berries in the snow. At that moment, they were convinced she was a spirit. Another account on that same bridge, the ghost is even more elusive in this one. It is said that a man from Spirit River had a frightening encounter with the ghost woman, but he was so shaken by the experience that he never spoke of it again. So he wouldn't even share it. He just said he's seen her and wouldn't talk about it. And there's been many other depictions of the same ghost wearing a cloak. Once again, a white cloak. Some portray her as a nun, which is interesting because there was nuns nearby in the town of Dunvegan. But yeah, really interesting because it's like, what's so special about a bridge crossing, right? And it happened shortly after it was built, right? So it's not like there was a history of stuff there. So maybe something happened in that valley.
Well, she seemed. Sorry, when I say she, I mean this specter of some kind seemed to be familiar with the area as it was picking berries, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like it was just doing what it had been doing
Right.
earlier, and
Just going through the motions kind of deal.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting because this town is very small. I don't even know is it a ghost town. I'm not sure, but there's lots of different haunting stories from that area. So there might be something about the land there too.
I've got another tie-in, bit more further south, Alberta. On Christmas Eve of 2022, 30-year-old trucker Dan Whelan drives through a brutal blizzard on Highway 2, hauling a load of holiday goods from south of Red Deer.
Sounds like a movie.
Yeah.
Like getting the holiday goods delivered through a blizzard.
And there's
On
snow
Christmas
and
Eve.
this, yeah.
Right? The kids depend on me.
Yeah.
Well, just wait. It dives into some of this familiar lore.
Is it Santa?
Near Leduc, his headlights catch a woman standing on the shoulder, shivering in a tattered coat. Thinking of the cold, he pulls over and lets her in. She says little, her voice soft and distant. her face pale with dark, hollow eyes. She asks to be dropped off at home in Edmonton. Moments later, Dan glances back to find the seat empty, but a lingering damp spot where she sat. Spooked, he stops at a diner where an old man tells him of the Christmas hitchhiker, a woman who died in a crash decades ago, still looking for her way home.
Wow.
And this was submitted by Dan, 33.
That is not the first time I hear a story like that, for sure. Like there's a lot of trucker stops or trucker ghost story related.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do a lot of hitchhiking and so that's quite interesting. There's one close to home.
Well, and with that story, Mike and I know someone whose mom would drive the same stretch of highway every day over this bridge. And this wasn't in Canada. This was in Ireland. But she's this little old lady, has no real interest in this stuff. And one day she sees a boy in her back seat as she looks in her rearview mirror. And she almost crashes as she comes to a screaming halt. And then the boy's not there. So she starts on her journey again, and over a period of the next few months, she catches this boy in her back seat every so often until she's finally like, I release you to Jesus, and never saw this boy again. And
Really?
so again, those are my favorite kind of stories where it's like this little old lady isn't looking, she's not out with a spirit box at a haunted location. It's like she's just minding her own business, and she saw something. But again, it's that bridge, it's that remoteness, it's something appearing in her backseat or a hitchhiker type figure.
In that story, do you know if it was kind of mirror related or if she was just turning around and looking at it, or was it in the mirror?
I can't tell you for sure, but from what I recall, it sounds like she would catch it in her peripheral sometimes.
Right.
And then in her rearview mirror. So,
right.
But the mirror thing is interesting
It's
too.
It's interesting
right?
too, because I was going to say some people, or some, let's say spirits, if can kind of get stuck in the mirror type of dimension, I don't know, or space, I guess, and time. I don't know how that would work, but yeah.
We need a Doctor
That's
Strange portal
I know,
ring.
right? Like I'm just going all like over there. But.
Well, it actually happened to my my grandma. So it was my grandma, her sister. We call her my aunt, but they're about the same age. And I think they had one other person with them. They were driving back from BC. And they picked up a hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker came in the car. Like, so there was the interaction, right? Like, they came in the car, started driving. Can't remember what they were talking about, but all of a sudden it was gone. It was this, whatever was in their car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like they had interacted with it.
Wow.
Invited it in.
Multiple people saw it.
Yeah, and it was gone. Now they. My grandma believes it was an angel. But yeah, it was just like, and this is my grandma. Like, this is not someone, like you say, she's not looking for paranormal stories.
Yeah.
Like, this just happened, right? So yeah, those ones are always, I find those interesting when it's just someone saying, hey, this happened, I don't know what it was, right? So
Well, this next one is from Megan, 37, and she's in Sylvan Lake, Alberta. This is from 2023, and she says, spending Christmas at a family's cabin near Sylvan Lake, I find myself alone when a knock comes at my door. And Megan opens it to a pale, shivering boy no older than 8, wrapped in an old quilt. He says he's lost and asks to come in. Megan makes him tea, but when she turns back, he's gone. The chair is soaked, and the floorboards creak as if someone still walks around. Following wet footprints outside, she finds them ending at the lake, where ice is cracked in the shape of a child's body. Later, she learns of a boy who fell through the ice decades ago and is said to visit cabins during blizzards, forever trying to warm up. You know what's fascinating
this one's,
about this one is the boy asking permission to come in. It reminds me of the black-eyed children phenomena, where there's always the insistence or the asking to cross the threshold. But it doesn't seem malevolent like that in this story, but it's just interesting that there's a request to cross the threshold.
Yeah, and I feel like you can, in these stories, especially with kids, you can feel that accidents kind of keep them, I don't know, in a like
Trapped state or
trapped and like confused.
right.
Don't know what happened to them.
Yeah.
That's why they can't cross over. Like in this situation, it seems like if there was it was a poor story. Like
Right.
he
Yeah.
obviously died in the lake,
Yeah.
but that's a really tragic story, right?
Yeah, and I think of like last time we were in the graveyard and we talked about, some of the biblical nature of death, but even how there's instances of verses and different beliefs where it's like when there's an injustice that's been committed, there's some sort of crying out from it still. Like
The blood cries out from the ground.
the blood cries out from the ground. Exactly.
Yes.
Like it's like these things are waiting for justice to take place, and so there's like a presence here still.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Like hundreds of years after kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
that energy still being there of that history. Yeah, that's why I try to get that history of the story as well,
Yeah.
because there is a story there
Yeah.
and there's a reason for it.
Right.
Yeah. And in some of our darker episodes we've done before, we've been pretty good about not trivializing some of that too, because I think a lot of paranormal enthusiasts are just like, oh, there was a massacre here,
Yeah.
and like there's
Let's,
not
make
a
money.
reverence for it almost.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, like the axe murder house. Let's just go there. That's really intense.
Yeah.
Right? Like they monetize it, and it's like I don't feel like it's about monetizing ghost stories.
That's
either.
right.
It's
Yeah.
just-
Yeah.
Well, I think just on that reverence piece, I feel like there's a weird perception out there that like we somehow are like greater than the spirit world. I don't know how to put it into words exactly,
Right.
but I'm like, the spirit world has been around a lot longer than we have.
Right.
And there's so much more to it than any of us know.
Mhm.
And there's beings that are far beyond our power. And it's, there needs to be a reverence, because it's not a game, right? And a lot of people treat it like a game, right? Like some of these shows and, YouTube channels and whatnot. But anyways, it's
And
it's
some
an
people
interesting
take
thought.
it seriously and really tell the story and like put their heart
Yeah.
into it, and that's what
Yeah.
we're looking for. A little bit more than. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. This next story, it's a bit closer to home for Mike and I. This is the subject line on the email was Shadow on the Ice Road. In 2015, 29-year-old Mark Jennings, an ice road trucker, takes one last trip to deliver some supplies to a remote community near Fort McMurray. The blizzard is relentless, as it always is. Visibility almost non-existent, as it always is. When he notices a tall shadow walking alongside his truck. At first he assumes it's a trick of the light, but it keeps pace with him. Its glowing eyes reflecting in the side mirror. When he stops to check his rig, he hears footsteps crunching in the snow behind him and a metallic sound. He turns to see the shadow looming closer, impossibly tall and angular, as if stitched together from darkness. Mark races back to his truck, and the shadow follows him for the next several kilometers before vanishing. Locals later tell him of the Wendigo, a spirit that haunts those who travel alone in the winter along that stretch of road. And Mike and I, in our episode that encompassed the Wendigo and Wendigo psychosis, had a similar encounter where we were near fairy ring underneath a full moon, and had heard this metallic sound.
Oh yeah, jeez, I never even.
And we had this deeply unsettled feeling, and one of the people who we knew was going out there came back to us. She's like, "Are you okay? I was like praying over you guys. I saw this like," and she describes what a Wendigo is, and she had no idea, no context that that's what we were researching and reading about and exploring with, and
If I'm in a good headspace, I can say that name. But sometimes if I think about that name too much, it really, it's unsettling.
Yeah, and Alberta is historically like deep history,
Yeah.
historically known for Wendigo and
Yeah.
Wendigo.
Yeah.
The cannibalistic spirit, and then
Yeah.
the actual being too.
Like even
So,
Yeah.
even some of the First Nations
Mm-hmm.
groups
Yeah.
along the foothills, like it's embedded in their verbal history, talking about people that have gone and wandered, and they start like turning into these
well, look
beings or
at
whatever.
Swift Runner and
Yeah,
his
Swift
execution
Runner.
here, and and just the fact, and we talk about this in our episode, but just the fact that this is so common, it's in the DSM as Wendigo psychosis, right?
Mhm.
Where somebody
Yeah.
becomes like ravenously cannibalistic.
One other thought that comes to my mind with that one, sometimes, like I think, as much as there's scary things out there and like demons and ghosts, whatever else, there's also angels, and
Yeah.
I know sometimes they're quite terrifying looking. They're not Cupid and
Well,
Not
even
fat
Cupid's-
cherub babies.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, those would be terrifying
Yeah.
too.
Like,
because
Get away from me.
I was talking with a friend, and he's he sees people's angels quite often, and he was just mentioning some of them are quite scary looking, right? And he always tests the spirit when he sees them. But anyways, I'm just thinking about that story and how like maybe that was an angel like protecting him across the ice road, right? Like that's a dangerous place to be. Obviously it didn't seem to torment him or harm him. It was just running in pace with him, almost like I'm with you, getting across the lake or whatever. I don't know, just a thought, because sometimes things that are unknown to us are scary, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not always bad, but they can be very scary. So
And do you think like if you fear it, it gets worse?
I mean,
like that
yeah.
fear would
Well, it's
obviously.
it's a frenzy, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you see all of these stories throughout history where it's like angels visit people, and the angels are like, "Don't be afraid," and the people are like,
but I
afraid.
am.
Yes.
They're like on the ground, like on the floor, like trembling. Yeah, true.
So
Yeah.
speaking of scary but unknown, this next one is called The Candle in the Woods, and this was submitted by a fan of ours, 42-year-old Diana Hall. So shout out to Diana for submitting this.
Thank-
In 2015, in the outskirts of Grand Prairie, Diana Hall goes for a Christmas Eve walk after a heavy snowfall. While hiking through the wooded falls near her property, she notices a single candle flickering in the distance, standing upright in the snow. As she approaches, the candle suddenly extinguishes, leaving behind an eerie silence. She looks around and sees no one, but picks up the candle and heads home. As she's heading home, she hears faint footprints crunching the snow, but seeing no one. Frightened, she hurries home, thinking it may be a hunter who's out there stalking her. But she ends up finding a similar candle burning on her doorstep.
Wow.
Her grandmother later tells her it's a local legend, the Candle of Remembrance it's called, said to appear to those who have unknowingly saved a life during the year.
Oh, that's a nice turn to the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
But I can't tell you how spooked I would be if I
Oh,
was at a
heck yeah.
cabin alone in the middle of nowhere
And
and
then
I
you
see a
see a
candle
candle
burning in the snow.
Right in the middle.
And then I go back home and
And
there's
it's-
one
oh,
burning on the doorstep too.
That would be a warning.
Yeah.
You'd
Yeah,
be
right?
Like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So I had asked Diana if there was anything mystical or eerie about the candle, and she says it just looks like a candle you could buy at the dollar store.
That's
Doesn't look
so
benevolently made or anything. It
Yeah.
doesn't look miraculous.
So maybe that's another one of those, like angelic kind of encounters, maybe. I know, yeah, Grand Prairie area actually has quite a few different stories and
Yeah,
folklore.
there's a lot of First Nations, like you said earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of up north, it's a lot of storytelling and
Yeah, but I'm unhappy with that ending because it could explain anything. It's somebody who's unknowingly saved a life during the year. There's just no sort of
yeah.
context or
summarization
closure.
of it. Well, how many of us could say we unknowingly saved a life
True.
during the year, right?
True.
It's like, oh, I left to work 10 minutes late. Maybe I didn't crash into somebody because I left for
Right.
10 minutes late. So it's
Right.
like maybe that was used to explain away the candle, and who knows what I mean, maybe it has to do with that.
Right.
Because if I heard
Diana,
that as a
I'm
legend,
sorry. I
yeah.
hope you continue listening, but I just, who knows what it has to do with, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, if that happened to me and I heard the legend, I'd be like running through all of the events that had
Yeah.
happened and be like, how did I wonder what it is. And it's like, only God knows, or you
Yeah.
know, okay, well, it'd
Yeah.
be nice to have a little bit more context, because obviously the message was for her, Diana.
Yeah. It's like a
Yeah.
personal, very personal experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. Okay, so this next one is called the Christmas Snowman of Vermilion. And before we dive into it, I'm discovering that there's a lot of stories around snowmen and snowmen seemingly moving on their own or some sort of possessive qualities or characteristics. And I had no idea that existed before like a week ago.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that is kind of creepy.
Like
Yeah.
snowmen or like Yeti.
Yeah. Abominable snowman.
Yeah, like I don't.
well, I'm thinking
Or both, or all,
it's
or
no, they're referring to like a literal snowman.
okay.
Like a snowman you make out
Okay.
of snow. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like,
Jack Frost.
carrot
Yeah,
nose.
Jack Frost.
Okay, we're going there.
Yeah. Is there a snowman horror movie at all?
Oh,
Like,
probably.
I bet you there is.
Guaranteed.
it's probably like
Jack Frost.
yeah, it's probably not even a
something.
B film. It's probably like a C film.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about like people's experiences with dolls and creepy circumstances surrounding them, then I mean, a snowman is another inanimate object that has some sort of potential with it, right?
True.
Okay, random, really quick doll story.
Yeah.
And it was
Is this
nothing.
your elf on the shelf with your
No,
kids and
no.
moving
Oh,
it
God,
around?
that's
Yeah,
creepy.
that would be creepy. There was nothing paranormal about this. It was just scared the whatever out of me for a brief moment. I was looking on the baby monitor screen, and like,
Oh, those are weird.
yeah,
too.
the kids have bunk beds, and obviously it's dark, so it's infrared. And like one of the dolls,
No.
the eyes are like, they were totally blacked out in the infrared, and so I just see these black eyes like in the bed with my child. I was like, what? And then
So
I'm like,
creepy.
and then I'm like, wait, it's probably a doll. So I go up and check, and it was a doll. But I was like, man, that gave my heart like a quick stop. For a
No
second there.
kidding.
The
I
illusion.
was like, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
beat up some ghosts. You're in my daughter's bed.
The illusion of it all. hey?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways.
So in the town of Vermilion, a 9-year-old Hannah Clark and her little brother Ben build a snowman in their backyard on Christmas morning. It's a typical snowman with black buttons, a carrot nose, and a tattered scarf. But when the children wake the next day, the snowman's arms are raised, as though beckoning toward the house. By the third morning, the snowman is somehow standing closer to the house, its eyes looking up toward Hannah's bedroom window. Terrified, the children beg their parents to knock it down, but when their dad steps outside, the snowman is inexplicably gone. Some in the town whisper about the Frost Watcher, a snowman said to protect children from unseen dangers, but only if left untouched.
Interesting.
I'm just thinking of, like as we're going through these stories, I'm thinking of like, why is this time of the year, this season, there seems to be a lot of kind of spiritual, paranormal type stories. I wonder if part of it is, and forgive me for being the, what would you call it? Not being too overly paranormal here about it, but, it's the time of the year where we're all like thinking, or, as kids, we're all thinking about Santa and like this mystical being, that flies through the air and brings presents and comes, through your chimney.
Santa's a
and stuff.
witch, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
just, like he's a paranormal figure, right? Like he's not normal, right? So I wonder if we're, it's like our minds are maybe, especially as kids, but even as parents, and it's just ingrained in us since we were kids. Maybe we just have this like, this preconceived idea with this season of thinking of, spiritual things or paranormal things. I wonder if that's part of it.
I think there's a reason that we have kind of celebrations around this time of year, because solstice is on Saturday, December 21st. Solstice has a huge kind of magical winter shift, seasonal winter shift. And it might not be magical, but it's definitely with the sun and the moon, and it's very interconnected with like the season.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's something there.
True.
Well,
like it's root. Maybe it's
like,
going even further back than what
like
I
when
said,
they
right?
because they looked at the stars more often and went with the moon and how much sun we're having right now. I'm not saying that like I'm trying to ground it more as less of a mystical thing. Of course, Santa Claus is a little out there, and I totally get that.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there's a magical aspect of specifically solstice or or like the 25th even, or you know.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think there's a part of us in terms of evolution that's like, oh, it's darker outside, we're more aware, we're more paranoid, people aren't sleeping or they're not getting as much vitamin from the sun. But at the same time, you've got winter solstice, you've got Halloween, you've got some of these other festivals that seem to center around this time of the year because there's more encounters,
like the magic of winter, which is like like shutting down and like going in the darkness. I think we do that as a whole, really, in nature.
Fair enough.
But there's something that's to be said about this like story of like, how did we get to like Santa Claus bringing Christmas to every child? You know.
This one is called Lights Over Fort Saskatchewan, and this is from Elliot Parks. Elliot Parks, who is 36 years old, sits in his backyard in Fort Saskatchewan, enjoying the peace after a long day with his family. As he sips on his coffee, he notices 3 bright lights hovering silently over the river valley. At first, he assumes that they're drones or planes, but they don't move or blink. Instead, they grow brighter, almost pulsating, then vanish entirely, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Later that week, a neighbor mentions seeing similar lights and recounts of others who have spotted lights around that area. Days later, Elliot's brother narrowly escapes a severe car accident because of the same appearance of lights along an icy road.
A car crash? Well, now that's dangerous.
And it seems like, so it says that Elliot had said that his brother narrowly escaped this severe car accident because of the lights on the road, which remind me of L.A. Marzulli in his documentary The Watchers talks about I think it was a World War II pilot who was lost at sea in the fog, and this UFO essentially guided his plane home to safety before disappearing.
I remember that story. Have you guys ever seen that documentary, like of the Fifth Kind or something like that?
Oh yes,
the movie or the documentary?
It's a
Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
The fifth or sixth or something like that. Anyways, in there, don't they say something similar, like a similar story like this?
Remember.
But anyways, they were like talking to, like it was guiding them, but they were talking to it telepathically. Anyways, it was like a weird.
I think that's probably like CE5 kind of stuff.
It is, yeah. The Close
I was thinking
Encounters,
of the movie.
the girl from Resident Evil.
The one that we watched, and like
that
it was like
scared
found
the pants off of us. Yeah,
it was like found footage, but it was fake in the end.
Oh.
But they made it very believable.
Okay.
Yeah, what their intentions
Well, and
are.
that's and let's relate that back to Wendigo, right? Because like I feel like I had a nightmare just even thinking or saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Like things that can come inside you and just be like in your thoughts and just kind of not haunt you, but just it's there, and then you're like, okay, you got to kind of cleanse your energy and get rid of it, but but it's like people who are open to that sort of thing, and then it's like, it can get messy.
Yeah, and even though the movie was fake, it still opens a door of fear, and it's like that spirit clings onto you, that spirit of fear clings onto you, and again, it's fake, but it's like.
No, but like again, that fear can make it real, right? It's just like
take
faith.
a root in it.
It's like faith, right? So
yeah.
I had read one recently. I can kind of tell it a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
But it was so it's a little boy, and on Christmas Day, his parents can't find him, and they, try and search for hours, and they see him in the field, and they go and grab him, and it's really cold, and he doesn't even have a coat on. So they go and get him, and he's got severe frostbite. He's almost at the point of dying, and so they bring him to the hospital, and the doctors were like, yeah, you had a lot of frostbite. He had to stay at the doctors for quite a while, and he recovered and everything was fine, but he was there until January, and he was under close encounter. And when the doctor kind of had that relationship with him where he was like, what did you see in the field, or what happened in the field, and he would just say the field angel, and the field angel was out there, and she needed me, and she needed me to help her kind of go through. And the doctor was like, this kid's crazy. Obviously, we're going to keep him at the hospital for a little bit longer. He just went out and almost died from frostbite. So he's keeping an eye on him. And then finally he goes home and everything's fine. But the doctor's still kind of seeing him every month. And I guess November of the next year pops around and he's still seeing him every month. And he's like, hey, kid, Christmas is coming. Are you ready to, what's going to happen? And he's like, well, I'm going to go out in the field and I'm going to go see Field Angel. And he kept seeing this angel out in the field. And so his parents were like, we don't know what he's talking about. The doctor was like, we keep a close eye on him on Christmas because he's going to go out there. But anyways, he ends up on Christmas Day that year, going back out to the field, and his mom looks for him frantically and goes out there, and so she goes back to the doctor the next day, and she's like, tells the doctor everything, and basically she was like, she said she saw that angel then, and they were both seen the angel. And
sorry, who saw it?
The mom.
The mom, okay.
The mom had seen it as well, finally on Christmas Day, and the angel was trying to kind of leave Earth, and needed help, and the boy couldn't do it on his own. So, the legend goes that she made herself visible to the mom so that they could both help her transcend, and then they both sounded crazy to the doctor.
Wow, it just keeps growing.
But yeah, no. Finally, the mom was like, I believe you, and it actually happened, and they both, encountered it.
It's always whenever something weird or strange happens, and it's you're the only person that sees it, you're always like, hey, is it in my head, right? But then when there's someone else that confirms it, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
Yeah.
And I've seen a couple of UFO sightings in Cold Lake, and my friend was with me, and we both saw the same exact thing.
Cold Lake is so interesting.
Cold Lake is amazing. Again, First Nation area,
military.
lots of and lots of stories, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I read a story on Cold Lake. This old used to be in the army. He claims that there's a massive underground base somewhere north of Cold Lake on the Saskatchewan Alberta border, talking about how it's connected to other bases around the world. It's just a random story that I saw online, but I'm those type of stories always get me hooked. I'm gonna go on Google Earth and I'm gonna find where it is, and then I'm gonna go. It's the boy in me.
It is huge. It's an underground. There's an underground thing there for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's one of the biggest bases in Canada, right? So.
Yeah, and when I've talked to skeptics, I'm like, well, what will convince you that this phenomena is real? Mm-hmm. And they can't give me an answer, because I'm like, you've got Canada's former defense minister Paul Hellé talking about how UFOs are real and alien greys are real. You've got France's foreign intelligence minister. You've got these guys from the CIA. You've got RCMP higher ups talking about them. At one point, will you be convinced? Yeah. And one question I like to ask the most is, how many UFO sightings have there been through history? Or how many paranormal encounters have there been throughout history? billions,
Millions.
right?
Yeah, billions.
Throughout all of history.
Yeah.
It only takes one to be true that makes it all real,
Yeah.
right? It only takes one encounter with a ghost
Mm-hmm.
to be true out of the millions of people who have seen ghosts. Only one to prove that there's a world beyond our own, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like,
For one individual.
yeah, you could have 999,000 that are fake, but one that's real, and that changes everything. That
Yeah.
changes the world, that changes physics, that changes history as we know it. And
Sure.
so in order to say that billions of people across history and these paranormal encounters by all of them have been all wrong, they can all be explained away with logic and reason, is less
Yeah.
statistically likely than saying, maybe at least one is true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Between, ghosts, UFOs, like monsters,
Demons, angels,
aliens.
elves, fairies, like
Like
everything.
everything,
It's-
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very
Well,
true.
it all comes. There's a root in storytelling in humans too,
Yeah, oh yeah.
and then there's also the experience that
Yeah.
we have, and so those tie into all that.
I mean, I know, I've shared before on the podcast, like, I've had experiences myself where it's like, yep, like I have no reason to believe that wasn't real, right? Like,
Well, exactly.
unless I'm like having serious mental break, like, where I'm seeing things.
Well, like you said earlier, right? When someone else has an experience with you, it almost makes it even more real. Because,
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
have your own, you're like, am I going to trust my mind,
Yeah,
body,
yeah.
spirit, blah, blah. But when someone else is there with you experiencing and says, did you see that? Or, it makes it, that's an extra layer of comfort that you're like, wow.
Yeah, and it's a lot more authentic when the stories differ slightly, because you get skeptics who are like, well, no, these stories aren't lining up. It's like, okay, if you go to a witness or a group of witnesses who have been involved in some sort of shooting, and you'll get one witness is like, I heard 4 shots. Then you'll get another witness from the same shooting. It's like, no, I heard 6 shots.
Exactly.
And it
Memory.
doesn't mean, and it's actually more
perception,
it's actually more suspicious when the stories line up
Yeah.
perfectly. It seems
Right.
rehearsed, right?
Well, and even like a step above is like, let's say these beings that we're seeing are in a different dimension, like a 4th dimension. Like, there's no way people are going to describe stuff like that the same, because it's like we can't even comprehend it. So, we're describing what we're seeing, even though we can't fully comprehend what we're seeing. So
Yeah, it's
there's-
not
they
like
should
we have a
not allow-
math equation about
Yeah,
it, and there's an
exactly.
answer at the end, you
Yeah.
know.
Like the
That's
sun
why
is
I
round.
like math. I do like math because there's at least an answer, and there's at least
Yeah, true.
you know what I mean? Like math won't lie to you.
Like, how would I be able to explain something that's in a different dimension or has different reality, different laws of physics or whatever that, whatever
Yeah.
the spirit realm follows? I
Well,
don't know.
science has always evolved, right? It
Yeah.
used to be thought that the science that came out right now was crazy to think.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
we're, so it's always evolving. And
Yeah.
eventually religion and science will be like one.
Yeah.
And therefore, there's going to be the maybe the overlap of belief and faith with scientific proof.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, for sure. I mean, it's like we believe things that are the way they are until all of a sudden it's proven wrong. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess we'll move forward then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one's not necessarily ghost or creature related, but this was by a 34-year-old named Jordan who had posted in Alberta Paranormal Community Facebook page. And on Christmas Eve, 34-year-old Jordan was driving home late from his parents' house, and this is by Strathcona County, crossing an old railway near Adrossan.
Ardrossan, yeah.
Yeah.
Adrossan. He saw the faint lights of a train approaching. He stopped at the crossing and waited and felt the rumbling and sound of the train, but it never arrived. When he got out to look, he saw the tracks were completely covered in snow, and the light was gone. As he stood there, the faint sound of a train whistle echoed in the cold, followed by the screech of brakes, and he couldn't explain what it was. And
It's a ghost train. That's crazy.
yeah, and I haven't really explored that side of the paranormal before. Like we've all heard lots of ghost stories, but in terms of carriages with horses or ghost trains. I don't understand, or I can't seem to fathom how that would factor into some of what we're talking about
Of
tonight.
paranormal. Well, Polar Express. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I was just
But,
thinking that.
Have you seen that movie? That movie's scary enough.
I've
love
not.
that movie.
I've not, because I heard,
The
yeah,
CGI is just...
it's
It's a
bad.
good. It's not scary. Come on.
There's the one kid when they arrive and he's like, oh, I'm like,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's funny because when I picked up that Christmas stories book, I also picked up Trains and Locomotives That Are Haunted.
Go
So
figure.
I'm going to look through that.
Nice.
But
Yeah.
I'm interested too, because I feel like, again, there's history. There's a story there. There might be a train track that used to be in use and now isn't,
yeah.
or who knows?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, they and trains encounter people, cars, animals
Right.
on the
Yeah.
tracks.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I heard that being a conductor is actually painful.
Or can be quite traumatizing.
It can be
You
very
see some terrible
traumatizing,
things, yeah.
and like I assume with that, you know, heaviness of what it is, there comes a lot of stories around that.
I think too, for that story, Nathan. I was just reaching for my hat that I'm not wearing. With that story, I think, like I really believe that God has made us all unique and given us special gifts, and some people are really sensitive spiritually. Some people are prophetic and can, you know, see things,
Sense things
sense things coming, whatever, like all the different types of spiritual giftings. I think, you know, something like that could be a situation where someone's seeing something. Maybe it's like an event in the past or event coming that maybe God or, you know, the Holy Spirit or whatever is trying to highlight for you. That's one thing that pops into my mind, because I know people that are very sensitive to that kind of stuff. They get images in their head, or sometimes they have an open vision.
And premonition.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's could be
and-
something related to that, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also think it could be maybe some sort of physics we don't understand yet. Like,
Could be.
there's this old writer, he's passed away, named Dr. David Vancouvering, and I can't speak for all of his stuff, but he's talked about how on a molecular level we're all vibrating, right? That we're not actually solid beings, we're not actually solid objects on a molecular level. It's and he we may have talked about him on the podcast before, but he helped invent the lasers that NASA uses for communicating with satellites in the sky, and he co-invented the synthesizer with Kenneth Boog, so like using physics. But he talked about how maybe some of these ghosts are leftover vibrations of things. He called them echoes of something that used to exist there, and that maybe we just don't understand how we see them from time to time.
I've actually heard that before too, about the vibrations.
Vibration, I was gonna say
Yeah,
that
and
word.
how, like, even when you speak a word, there's been some theories and studies into how, like, the sound, like, just, it doesn't disappear, it just gets infinitesimally smaller. And so it's like bouncing around in this space for like ever, because it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But
he
it's
actually
still
talked
there.
about, like, if you could create a capture device like we have with radios that pick up frequencies, you could pick up words that have been spoken from hundreds of years ago that are just continuing to travel on.
Interesting.
And
The word echo and vibration, definitely in physics, with physics, is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so much, like, cool, like, even just from a spiritual level and, like, biblical stuff too, about, like, words having power and, like,
Or
God
you think of
speaking
prayer and
word.
meditation.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I just want to talk about Dr. I want to say, like, the one who did the water study. And
The frozen water?
yes,
Like,
the frozen water. There was, like, water that
Mm-hmm.
was being told "I love you" and a prayer, and how when they froze that,
Mm-hmm.
that the molecule was actually beautiful.
Yeah.
structure versus water that had been listening to metal music that it was just distorted and weird.
Mythbusters did that with plants too.
Yeah.
They did the exact
There's been
same,
lots of
exact
studies
same
with
study.
plants,
and rice too. You can have
know about
rice.
rice.
Yeah, so there's an experiment where you can have rice in your closet. You'll have 2 different closets, 2 different rice things in water. One that you'll say I love you to every day, and then the other one you say I hate you. And the one with the I hate you is moldy after a week, and the one that you say I love you to is still white rice.
Well, next time I get a Big Mac from McDonald's.
I love it.
I don't know about that. That'll still be the same thing in 30 years.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know about that.
Freezes in time.
Have you seen that?
It's like, this
the
study's a bit
McDonald's,
confusing.
the preserves.
Yeah.
That must be the secret. McDonald's
like you're healthy
employees
for my body,
they
and then
speak
eat
to
it.
your food before they give it to you. Like, you will preserve forever. Oh, jeez.
No, but it just on a molecular level, I think words do kind of put out energy and vibration, especially when thoughts and feelings are being put in that.
Oh, it's just wild, the invisible spectrum we don't see. All of these frequencies.
Going all over the place.
And frequencies used to be, considered hippie-ish when it was talked about in a metaphysical manner and like a spiritual manner.
Yeah.
But now there's I think, is it radiological equipment that's uses frequencies to treat certain diseases, and
there's all kinds of stuff.
it's very real.
I mean, even ultrasound for
Yeah.
imaging, but also for the ones that they use to help improve healing in an area. Like, it all has to do with sound waves, right?
Yeah.
Well, and there's that SWAT device that's used. Uses a frequency to cause nausea.
It's called LRAD or something, or
yeah, and it's for crowd dispersion, and they'll aim it at a crowd, and it'll cause nausea, it'll cause disorientation, confusion. And
so like crowd control, a little bit of crowd control in that.
It is, and people called that side of things a conspiracy for a long time when they're like, no, they're messing with us with radio waves, and then you start to see some of these patents come out. Where
What do you think about the weather manipulation stuff?
Oh, like
HARP.
Yeah.
That's another level.
Mike and I
conspiracy.
butt heads on this before.
Okay, as someone who I just started school to be a meteorologist. I didn't keep going, but it's a huge hobby of mine. Like, I do weather forecasting and all that stuff. The amount of energy to actually, on a large scale, create a storm or change some kind of weather pattern is like astronomical. For sure, there's weather modification, cloud seeding. I mean, there's a program in Alberta here where there's hail seeding every time there's a storm. They fly around the storms and they put silver iodide in it to try and it breaks up the molecules so that the hail theoretically is smaller. And they've been doing this for decades.
So weather modification, because there's that Top Gear video on YouTube where NASA used one of their rockets to create a giant storm cloud, giant rain cloud, right? Okay. But I think where we butt heads is the larger scale.
Like HARP and stuff?
Yeah. I don't think it's over continents or anything, but whenever I see consumers having access to some of this equipment, I'm like, how much more equipment is there that some of these shadowy governmental agencies have that
we might not be aware of?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna stop.
Yeah, you never know. And
we'll do an episode on weather mod.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you did say there is at least
there's
some
a modification. There's if they can build a cloud, what else can they? It's not we're not saying like, oh, they're cloning humans, but we're like saying like they have the equipment
whoa.
They probably have the equipment to.
Yeah.
But
I guess where I get lost is like, I don't think they can summon a hurricane in a specific spot or start an earthquake here. Like, that's
I think that's pretty conspiracy.
Hold on.
There's a huge hurricane.
Hold on. I love how this is a Christmas episode. This is where
Merry Christmas,
to Midnight
everyone.
Mysteries.
Earthquakes.
Happy holidays.
Earthquakes.
Yeah.
There's mining equipment that inadvertently cause earthquakes.
Sure.
So I fully believe that we're capable of causing earthquakes, and
with a lot of mine explosions. Sure.
And I'm not saying that every earthquake we see is
man-made.
from the shadow government. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, could some of these organizations use it to destabilize regions? It's theoretical at the least.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, if
You couldn't see them using it to cause.
well, here's the thing though. Like fracking, for an example,
Right.
Yeah.
it causes earthquakes, but that's
Right.
because you're clearing out all
Big,
this
big
material, and then eventually there's a space, and it caves in or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's like a physical intervention. But to say like HARP, they're just using some
No,
kind
I'm
of
not talking about. I'm not
Okay.
talking about
No,
harm.
no, that
Okay.
just.
No. I'm talking about the wider scale.
Okay.
thing. I'm not
Yeah.
saying there's a satellite in the sky causing earthquakes.
Okay,
I'm not
okay,
saying that, just to
No.
be clear.
good.
But
No.
could a satellite in the sky use some sort of like superheated laser to create? I don't know. I don't know.
I think theoretically it's probably possible.
Oh, we've moved him from a no to a theoretical.
But it is theoretical. It is. And do we have proof? No. Right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where it's like, is it kind of, Truman Show, like, is it there? Is it not there? We don't know. Right? And then unless
Good
we
movie.
question it or we talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so let's end on a bit of a positive note for our Christmas episode.
that sounds good.
On Christmas Eve, 29-year-old Maya was rushing home after a long shift at the hospital when her car broke down on a deserted road near Canmore. Frustrated and cold, she tried calling for help, but her phone had no signal. Moments later, a man appeared out of nowhere, dressed simply despite the freezing weather. He offered to take a look at her car and, after a few minutes, got it running again. "You'll be fine now," he said with a warm smile. Before she could thank him or even ask his name, he walked off into the snowy darkness. When Maya reached the gas station, she told the attendant about the stranger. The attendant frowned. "I hope he's okay. There's nothing but forest for kilometers around here." As she drove home, Maya felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as though someone had been watching out for her. That Christmas, she reflected on the kindness of a stranger, or perhaps something more, and it filled her heart with hope for the year ahead.
Wow, that is beautiful.
Very Merry Christmas.
But I have heard a number of stories like that too.
Yeah.
Me too. I think
Yeah.
I've read this story.
So once again, Erika, thank you for joining us tonight. This was a lot of fun to talk about Christmas and then every other paranormal and conspiracy topic under the sun.
Thank you so much for having me once again.
Yeah. So tonight we talked about Christmas ghostly encounters and seemingly possessed snowmen and other creepy paranormal encounters during wintertime. Did you or someone you know have a paranormal experience or encounter with something otherworldly this winter or around Christmas time? We'd love to connect with you. Send us a message or add your thoughts and comments below and we'll respond right back. Thanks for joining us. Remember, stay weird and we'll see you next time on Midnight Mysteries. Have a good night.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Give you my heart.